All right, very good. We really like that use case because, as enterprises start to actually adopt SDN, it's common that it's an IT or a technology-based company that's kind of leading the way in that. And clearly that's what Microsoft is doing, as well as it shows the collaboration that we have between OpenDaylight and organizations like ONF that we've been working with for so long. So next we have a panel for the advisory group. I'm going to ask my panelists to come up to the stage. They'll be introducing themselves here in a moment because I want them to talk a little bit about what they've been doing. But I want to talk a little bit about the advisory group. This is an advisory group panel. We started the advisory group, I don't know, probably 18 months ago, 12 months ago, somewhere in there. We had gone through a few iterations of how we wanted to engage with users so that they could be helping us with developing the OpenDaylight platform. And ultimately, we ended up with, and this was mostly led by Neela, we ended up with an organization or a group that was really not high-level business executives that are far away from the network, but actually folks that actually get their hands dirty, working with trying to figure out how they're going to evolve their networks and leverage these new technologies and disruptive technologies like OpenDaylight. So we've now got an organization, like I said, that's been in place. They serve a tremendous value to the community, actually much more than I was expecting when we started. We use them both to bounce ideas off of when we have a development choice that we're looking to make, as well as they're very helpful in being vocal in the things that the development community is not doing quite right for what their needs are. So with that, I'll have each one of these panelists again introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what they're doing, what their organization is doing, and where they are on their journey to again an SDN and more programmable network. So Toby, let's start with you.
Sure. So I'm Toby Ford. I work at AT&T. I'm an architect in the Domain 2 team that's responsible for our transformation that Chris talked about yesterday. My role is I actually come from a history a little bit different than what Chris talked about in his presentation. That presentation was very, I would call, network-oriented. And I only mention this because I'm reminded of it every 30 seconds by LinkedIn this morning. But I've been at AT&T for 10 years, and I came through an acquisition of a company called US Internetworking. I was the CTO of the first, last, and much maligned application service provider called, and then in that space, about 10 years ago, we were bought by AT&T because we had a virtualization platform, and a virtualization platform that not only had servers and storage, but also a networking aspect to it. So I've come from the realm of hosting in cloud and its evolution of, I think of sort of bottoms up from vSwitches and DVSs in VMware land through OpenStack and its evolution, Neutron and using OVS as an integral part of its native implementation, and then now working very closely with Contrail and with OpenDaylight and the other, and FDIO and these other entities in a more open way. So I'm on the board of OpenStack and the board of OPNFV, and just recently joined the advisory group of ODL as well.
Very good. Thank you, Toby. Chris?
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Luke. I work at Comcast. I'm also the advisory group chair at the moment. A little story which kind of explains how I ended up where I am in Comcast. When I joined there probably about just over 5 years ago, I was asking them how they do some of their service automation at the time, because they were telling me that it's a wonderful engine, it does automation for us, it's brilliant. And I said, great, so walk me through this. And so our OSS BSS delivers some XML to our service, and we've got a translation engine, and it spits out configuration, and it's great. The configure's right every single time. That's great. What happens to it then? Oh, well, we attach that to a remedy ticket. I said, okay, I'm not liking where this is going. What happens to it then? And then in about 2 weeks' time, someone will cut and paste this into a router without looking at it. And at that point, I was thinking, okay, we've got some work to do. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff around that which I could go into, which would probably get me into trouble. But the point there was that it became clear to me that there was quite a lot of work, there's quite a lot of institutional work that needed to happen to change the mindset for what automation really means for a network. I started coming up with terms like the definition of a robust change to the network. And robust is a loaded term, and it means a bunch of different things, but really it's the, how do I know this change really happened? And it happened the way I expected it, and it didn't break something else. That was around the time that SDN started climbing up the hype cycle, and that was about the time we started looking at how those concepts can improve the automation we're already working on, with a view to eventually migrating wholesale to a much more dynamic network. So the role I'm in today at Comcast is focused primarily on how I can introduce open source into that dynamic network. And that's why I'm here today.
Very good. Thanks, Chris. Alex?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Alex Zhang. I'm with ChinaMobile, but I work in San Jose in the office. We have a kind of a small R&D lab facility in Silicon Valley. So I actually work there. So my working in areas really the latest networking technology. I've been working on software-defined networking, including network function virtualization for many years. I was involved with OpenDaylight as an advisory group member almost at the very beginning, so I'm part of the founding member. And also I'm very active in many open source projects. So for ChinaMobile, we actually have a program called NovoNet. So this is the program that we use to transform our network into next generation using the latest networking technology, including programmable networks such as SDN, and of course the network function virtualization and cloud networking technology. So there's a lot of things going on with ChinaMobile, and so I'm just fortunate, working at the Silicon Valley and to look at the latest technology solutions to help out, ChinaMobile's, NovoNet program moving forward.
My name is Azher Mughal. I'm from CalTech. I'm a lead network engineer there for the LHC Tier 2 data center. The way we got involved into the SDN is the data sets that we move across the different Tier 2 or Tier 1 sites within the US or across the Europe is those data sets are very large in size. The current data sets we have, they are in the size of around like 300 petabyte. At CalTech, we have the storage capacity of around 5 petabyte. And one of the challenges why we moved to the SDN is that how we go and bypass the campus firewalls and without poking any holes, additional holes, and going through some of the bottlenecks which those devices create. And by creating alternate parallel paths to these experiments. And thus, if you have some kind of DTN nodes or intelligent devices which can simulate a path end-to-end from one campus to the other campus, crossing different domains, including Internet to ESNet or other carriers, and how you can efficiently then move the data across those sites. We started working earlier with the Floodlight, and before that we used like standard SDN tools called as OSCAs or Autobahn, developed within these campuses. And those softwares, basically what they do is they create end-to-end paths. They do realize the different network parameters like bandwidth reservation, VLANs, or the time scheduling. So using those SDN tools and now connected through the OTL, through the OpenDaylight, now we are seeing some improvements and trying to bring more into our workflows.
Excellent. Thanks, Azher. So we invite you to ask questions. I've obviously got some seed questions here as well, but please feel free to think up and ask questions of our panelists. We'll start with Chris. As the advisory group chair, you help set the agenda for the group's meetings as well as act as the liaison between the advisory group and the technical community. Please tell us a bit about your expectations coming into that role, as well as have the activities and the outcomes of that group been what you expected? Any surprises, either good or bad, from what you expected?
I mean, it's been a lot of fun. I won't deny that. At the start of the advisory group, which was at the start of last year, I thought it was an incredible opportunity to help give the development communities, some general end-user feedback advice in a way that we might not be able to otherwise. Especially as a collective, it was probably easier to come up with a cohesive message that developers could then actually interpret. I also found it a useful forum for developers to understand what it is we're really trying to do. I mean, they've made this platform, this product, how do we intend to use it, which might not be what they envisaged when they laid down the code in the first place. When we elected the chair, I was unsure what that role would really mean for this group, because we are a very diverse set of service providers, in some situations competitors, in other situations not. But we've actually been quite a friendly bunch. We generally get together, we have produced some quite constructive comments, in some occasions criticism of various aspects of the projects. But on that same note, in the past, one of our early, very prominent criticisms was on documentation of OpenDaylight. And I'm very happy to see that that has been taken on board by the development community. And for this past release, the amount of effort put in by the community to improve that situation has been really, really well received by the advisory group and the community at large.
Excellent, thanks, Chris. Other panelists, has it been what you expected, or?
Yeah, I think one thing that I think is very impressive that the group and also the OpenDaylight project, Nila and the field, you as well. So we start to look at it, whether we can get really useful use cases, right, from the network operators, particularly for the network that we are running down the field. So we've been working on that, collecting the use cases. I think this actually helped me a lot, looking at how we're going to address the programmability, right, for the brownfield network, right. And so I learned a lot from that. So I think certainly, and this is something that we did very well with the advisory group, right. So we also have the documents. So I would encourage everybody to look at it, the website we have, right. So it should be very good.
It's worth saying that a number of representatives from the advisory group volunteered to spend time with the documentation project to help improve it.
Right.
Yes, quite true, quite true.
Yeah, this template has been very helpful to us, extending beyond what it does for ODL, but Chris has been very helpful with me on creating other entities like this in other groups. So we just created the end user advisory group within OPNFV, and then also a large contributing OpenStack operator group within OpenStack as well. I think these groups are essential as we go from the kernel of people that have started working on maybe software-based approaches with networking and moving into the next round of people and convincing them, or operators or enterprises, convincing that next group. And this is an opportunity to let them sort of join us and hear their early problems or feedback about a project and whether or not it's working for them.
Right, right.
Yeah, I think the user experience is one of the key component where the advisory group basically can take and basically represent to the other groups, is that if you can create new plugins or new applications that will help the experiments at large. So I think this is where the things are required to lead.
I think a possibly unintended benefit to the advisory group is it gives each of us a better perspective of how other people are using that platform.
Right.
And thus can improve how we use it.
Yes, yes. And personally, again, coming from the open source side, I found that, one of the mantras of open source is, don't bring me your problem, bring me a coder, right? And along with your problem. So, because this isn't a vendor-user kind of relationship. This is a we're in this together. We're going to build this. And the advisory group has been an outstanding adjunct to that, in that, while what this group says isn't guaranteed to be committed to code, because now actually some of these folks are actually in the community with us, so they do have developers, and certainly they have vendors who care very much about them, who are part of the community. The stuff gets done, right? So it's a great adjunct to as a voice for those users to actually influence what's going on inside of the community.
Well, we've had a couple of occasions where Colin, the TSC chair, has brought specific issues to us to say, hey, we're not sure how, as a development community, to approach this issue. Can we get some feedback on this?
Yes. Yes, and I can tell you from personal experience, he uses that to close arguments.
Sure.
When there are arguments inside the development community, do it this way. No, do it this way. Well, let's go ask the user group. They'll close this for us. Right, and it's been a great service for us. So Toby, we heard from Chris Rice yesterday talk about AT&T's journey into open source and the company's engagement with the OpenDaylight community. It's clear that AT&T is one of the telecom end users that is furthest along with your adoption of open source and what you're trying to do. Can you share with us what you see as some of the most different and interesting aspects of working closely with open source development communities, as opposed to just working directly with your vendors like you have in the past?
Sure. So, I mean, for me, it affords us the opportunity to do a few things. One is to get more than one vendor to help us. I mean, a big part of our Domain 2 transformation is opening up the aperture and getting a larger community of help. And then making it so that it's not just a mono-y-mono kind of relationship, it's actually an ecosystem. So that's been very helpful to us in many ways, leverage ways, and also in just in getting more interoperability and getting focused on more standard approaches to things. So that's one part of it. The other part of it, I think, that we've been remiss on is on contribution and on really development. As you say, bring the developers into the picture, and then we'll talk. I think that the operators have a lot of work to do to bring on the right kind of talent to contribute. It's more than just hiring people who are network developers. That's hard in and of itself, and there's a limited group that way. But it's also getting people that can actually be participants in a collaborative organization. That's a whole different skill set. So I think we've done a good job to get to here, and then, but we still have a ways to go to be what I'd like to see as the end state for us and our involvement in open communities.
I'm going to ask you to elaborate in a couple of different directions, if you don't mind. One of which is challenges with working with the open source community. Again, it's not as though you've got this control, right? Have you seen any challenges with getting things together? The number of open source projects you're with. Feel free. And again, we like to shine lights on our warts as well. Again, in an open source community, so we know how to improve.
Yeah. So I mean, there's on the technical side. I mean, it has been an excellent way of creating diverse and innovative solutions. So my thing is lately talking about the yin and yang of iterative innovation, or in my parlance, iterative shit. And then on the other side, the balancing factor is about refactored core or consolidation, and they have to exist together. And I think the biggest challenge that I have lately is, we can all, in our hubris, go off and make our own projects, be PTLs, have our thing. But the end result, if the end result is a big mishmash of iterative innovation, then somebody's got to be responsible for and accountable for a level of refactoring. It's a good way to sniff out agile washing is if, we've had 25 cycles of iteration, and then, okay, when did you plan for, reducing technical debt? What's that? Anyways, so I mean, that's the other part of it that I think now is, especially with SDN, you're seeing so many projects pop up and so much overlap with a limited number of customers and a limited number of resources. And I think we have some work to do to clean that up across the board. And that's a lot of my thing here this week has been about this, focusing on getting interfaces right and consolidating on interfaces so that we can be allowed to have diverse innovation in the right spots.
Excellent, thank you. The other trajectory I wanted you to talk about briefly was cultural changes necessary in your company, again, working with open source. Policy process, right? Knowing how to write a check to a vendor is one thing. Getting developers, right? Getting authorization to get developers to work in a community is another. What challenges have you seen there or opportunities?
Well, there's a few parts of it. I mean, there's the CYA aspect of it. I mean, it's great having a vendor and then just say, hey, it's his problem. It's different when you're the one writing the code and making it work, and then you're accountable for it. So that takes a different mindset. And also, it's about technology too. It's like, if you rely solely on vendors to come up with the strategy, then that often leads you into a dead end. And so, but then the opposite problem is, okay, now that it's our responsibility, it's very open-ended, and how do we influence things to come to some focus? So that's one part of the challenge, is having the right kind of willingness to take risks and be accountable for what you're changing. I think the other part of it too is, especially on networking, I mean, we're at a cusp where, the old way was very manual. I logged in, I'm good at iOS, I can make things happen. We're transitioning to a state now where we want to manage a lot more than what one person can even comprehend. So we have to be thinking about it in terms of automation and development models and CI/CD, and that way of operating something is totally different than the highly managed change management processes of the past. And this transition is really tricky.
Yeah, I just want to add something to what Toby just said. I think the cultural change is really, really very important, because we're talking about the current network transformation is going to be many years, multiple years, right? Maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years even. If you look at the history of telecom, right, it's going to last, right? Whenever you have a new technology you want to introduce, right, so the whole thing is going to evolve, it's going to be changed over the time. I think this one's really different in the sense that we're talking about software-centric, right? Software-led transformation. And so if you look at the traditional, telco companies, they are not that quite, ready for so-called software-centric transformation. I think especially for traditional telcos, this is very important to really take, look at the open source projects, for example, and also the way they collaborate with vendors, the technology providers, right? So really, use this opportunity to transform themselves, right, into this thinking of using software, and the process, and the system, even the way to think really should be migrated.
So the approach we've taken is we've tried to tell our engineers, who are traditionally network engineers, that this isn't a taking away of what you do as a CLI jockey. This is about removing that laborious, mundane crap, automating that, and giving you more time to do more interesting and more valuable things with that time. And at the same time, providing opportunities to upskill so that they're able to participate in that. We recently just concluded our first round of a course that we had University of Pennsylvania design for us, which we ran network engineers through. And this was a how to think like a computer scientist course. It wasn't a computer science course, but it was comp sci professors teaching the critical thinking skills necessary to be able to think in a software world if you have a network background.
Yep. I think same goes, for example, for the experiments, for the academia as well, that what we have seen is there's a disjoint between where the applications are, the traditional applications, and where the SDN is moving. So the need what we are looking is the applications taking advantage of how the network is now behaving, and getting all those values back all the way to the application so that they can take the right decisions.
Excellent. Thanks, gentlemen. Alex, so ChinaMobile has been engaged with OpenDaylight now for some time and has also initiated another open source project, OpenO, to address that orchestration needs of NFV deployments. Can you share with us the impact you have seen on your organization from working in and leading these projects?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I will start with actually the continuation of what discussed with the open source in general. So I think open source projects means different things to different people, different companies, different operators. For us, I think there are three things I want to really highlight here. One is the solution. We want to find a solution fast, right? So this is from technology perspective. We cannot do the traditional way and to get something deployed. It takes forever, right? So I think certainly the open source project will offer the technology front, the solutions that we can get fast, right? At least we can try it out and then do the quick POC and get to the point that we can deploy that. So that's the first thing, and we look at it. And the second thing is really the ecosystem we talked about. This comes from the community, right? So given all the things changed right now, or moving to the next generation, I think we have to build a new ecosystem, so to speak, right? We cannot rely on the old model of the supply chain, right? So I do see the open source project with the big community such as OpenDaylight offers excellent opportunity for us to build a much powerful and healthy ecosystem going forward. Just imagine we deploy a certain solution that we're gonna hold on to that solution for 5 years, 10 years, or maybe it just took 5 months to develop it, right? So just think of it this way: we as an operator will have to hold on to it for many years to go. So that's where I see the open source, community, open source project will offer excellent opportunity for us to look at the ecosystem, so that we feel more comfortable, more confident, right, going forward. Continue to use that to deploy to support it. But the last one we talk about is really the culture thing, right? So now we look at a particular open source project, OpenDaylight. ChinaMobile, actually, it was announced yesterday as official news, right? We are the official member of the OpenDaylight community, right? So it's excellent. It's actually, we feel really excited about it. But if you look at the history, we have been involved with OpenDaylight a while ago, at least I believe probably 2 years ago. In fact, we have a few people from ChinaMobile from mainland fly here. They actually start looking at the OpenDaylight code, I guess probably 2 years ago, right? So this is where we start to, investigate the SDN controller, and as you mentioned, this OpenFlow. We also look at OpenFlow in the controller as well to begin with. So we involved with OpenDaylight, and we look at the solution, we look at the code, look at the community. We feel that this is great, right? At least for the network, the size that we have, the different segments we have. Well, we have the mobile, we have the IP core, we have now we also get into the data center networking, right? And of course, WAN. So we have so much that we want to really increase the programmability, right? And for these network segments. And of course, eventually we want to provide new services on top of that. So we look at it, so the OpenDaylight certainly provides it covers a lot of ground for us already for all this protocol it can support, right? So we actually have a small development team, right, and developers working on the code on OpenDaylight, right? So in fact, I think it's announced yesterday, right? So we're gonna also release our own controller based on OpenDaylight. It's called Arrow, right? So it's excellent. So we believe we're gonna continue to work with the community. We're gonna continue to look at the things that we actually can create a new project. In fact, we have another project with OpenDaylight. It's called the MPLS-TP. So this is one of the examples that we're gonna continue to invest, continue to work on this project, the platform, and working with the community. So speak of the OpenO. So actually, there's a little bit of story I want to share. I think last year, we look at it, the open source projects, we actually felt strongly that there's a strong need to have a upstream project, right, for the orchestration in that area. Now we look at it with a lot of initiatives going on, but at that time we certainly felt strongly that somebody needs to kind of start something in this area of the orchestration, right? So that's why we kind of took the initiative, right? So with the operator, particularly for the orchestration, operator needs to take initiative to start something, right? So that's why we kind of worked with a lot of partners. And also the operators, right, and start to see if we can start something, right, to have the open source project. Now we have this OpenO. It's under the Linux Foundation, right? We get a huge great support from Linux Foundation and a lot of our collaborators, right? So we set it up, and I think it's in very good shape. So we probably will have the first release this year. So it's very exciting given the relatively short period of time. I think the community has accomplished a lot over there. So for ChinaMobile, we believe that we certainly can offer a lot of value from operator perspective, to these OpenO projects, because I believe the orchestration part, particularly the service orchestration, the operator, start getting into the operator's core competence, and it's going to interact with the operator's OSS and BSS very closely. So this is where, I believe the operator can help a lot, by providing the feedback, providing the kind of the guidance from operation standpoint. So yeah, so we're going to continue to, work, with the community, to support the community, and move things forward on the orchestration part.
Excellent. Any comments from anybody else?
I can't remember the question.
Yeah, big question. ODA or OpenO and a lot of things, but yeah.
Just more in actually working and leading, I know, for example, I know Comcast is also very heavily involved in OpenStack and the things that you're trying to drive there.
I mean, personally, when FDIO launched earlier in the year, that tickled all the right spots in the back of my head as a long-time embedded systems kind of guy. So I've been heavily playing with VPP, and since that happens to align with some of their strategic goals, my company's been happy for me to actually dig in. I'm now a committer on the VPP project, which has been a huge amount of fun from my perspective.
Excellent, excellent. Any other comments? Okay. Questions from the audience? There we go. Let's start with Dan. Do we have mics, Abby? There we go. Thanks, Katie.
So, Dan Pitt. So, Chris, you just mentioned that you're a committer for VPP in FIDO. And one of the impressions that I get sometimes is that these big open source projects have a huge amount of contributions from vendors. Could the panelists sort of answer the question of how much are their organizations actually committing code and contributing upstream to OpenDaylight?
Well, we've launched a project under OpenDaylight called EMAD, which is related to our Energy 2020 project, which is about actively monitoring the energy utilization of all of our network plant and managing that. Eventually, what we're hoping to be able to do is shut bits of the network off when it's not in use. That is a project under OpenDaylight and was included in the release, as I recall. So, yes, we're active. Not as active as I would like, definitely, but we're building momentum in that space.
So we are working with a Yale group for the last 1 year. Our CalTech group is very small, so we are not doing any commits to the projects. But along with them, there is a control module called as Alto, the application layer traffic optimization, and that has been enhanced further to add some other concepts like RSA, like resident site abstractor for when you are designing like east and west domains, where those domains need to talk with each other. So there's an abstraction component which is going to come into the whole FAST framework, where we'll have the SPCE is already there, Alto is already there, and the RSA is going to come very soon. So these are some of the components where if you are designing east-west controllers, which are autonomous, and how they need to talk with for example, an exascale orchestrator on the top, which understands the site topology or the site abstraction layers, the minimum level of information which you need instead of overwhelming the orchestrator to take certain decisions. So this RSA will be coming very soon.
And one last thing, worth remembering that the Transport PCE project, which Neela mentioned yesterday, was entirely grown out of a carrier community, predominantly the Europeans.
As well as PCMM, right?
And PCMM, yeah.
Yeah, so for ChinaMobile, I probably can add one example of the project that we started, called MPLS-TB in the transport area. Yeah, certainly we're looking at using this the OpenFlow TTP to define the pipeline for the MPLS-TB that are customized to ChinaMobile's use case. Yeah, so I think I'm hopeful that we'll have the code kind of in testing. So hopefully we can also upstream contribute to the project very, very soon. Right, so.
Excellent. We'll go here, and then Katie, Chris also had a question afterwards. Okay.
Thanks, Phil. Jay Etchings, Arizona State University. So I have a question for Azher. So you had said that you're managing 5 petabytes of data, I guess, on your campus. Is this for research access? And then, of course, you're employing mechanisms through OpenDaylight or SDN to do firewall avoidance or path selection. Is that so you can share research data in some ubiquitous fashion? Because I'm familiar with what CalTech has done with data collection. And then is there a NSF proposal initiative or a paper or something that somebody like myself could go look at to see how this is being facilitated?
Right. So first thing is, please have a look at the supercomputing.caltech.edu. So we have papers from the last year, which was submitted to the IEEE or to the other workshops called as INDES. Those are specific to the supercomputing conferences, and one of the conferences coming ahead in November in Salt Lake City. So you are welcome to come see our work over there. Talking about the data that we have, this is about the LHC data. How it works, it's all distributed. It's distributed among 7 tier 2 sites. It's a hierarchical structure. It used to be, but now it is getting more into a mesh environment where anyone can, any tier level, tier 0 is our LHC where the data is getting generated. Tier 1 are the labs. For example, in US, we have 2 labs like Fermilab and Brookhaven National Lab. So those are the 2 labs where the data is coming from the tier 0. And then there are 7 sites, the tier 2 within the US, or about 150 globally across the whole world. And then there are tier 3 as well, which are attached to the tier 2s. So in general, tier 2s have, depending on their priorities, whether they like to have more compute, or when the NSF project is asking you to, that this year they are asking for more storage, there's a more demand, or there's a more need for the compute. For example, this year we are looking for more storage rather than more compute. So we are buying huge disk JBODs to be part of our main storage cluster. So this storage, if you are a member of the community, if you are a member of the CMS group, for example, we have some scientists, so they can definitely get accounts in our systems, or they can submit the jobs through the central job submission. For example, Condor job submission is there, and they can use it. We are running our jobs in our cluster all day, 365 days a year. You know, it is working. So so it is through the NSF grant, and there are many other campuses. For example, Nebraska and CalTech and UCSD, and there are many like UFL. They're part of this funding. And now talking about how we can use SDN to steer the traffic from bypassing the firewalls. So our group was a little bit lucky to have a separate 210 gigs in the past, and now we have 100 gig coming straight to our cluster by passing initially from first day through the optical infrastructure to our cluster. But in what we have seen in the groups, that many other campuses or groups, they don't have that leverage where they will have to bypass, they have a bypass available. So they have to go through the firewalls. And what they say that at times their data flows will stuck into the firewalls if they see some spike. So this is how we are looking at the Science DMZ. And Science DMZ and DTN, the data transfer nodes. So these are some of the concepts. So in one of the past grants from NSF, the project was called as DYNES, D-Y-N-E-S. So this was a project between Michigan, CalTech, and Vanderbilt, and a couple other campuses. So we developed a software that created paths end-to-end, crossing different domains. And those domains were, for example, our group, then Internet 2, then Merit, and then Michigan. So how you go across these different domains, so that was a challenge. So we created initially a peering between all these domains, and then using the software, using a simple CLI command like copy from this site, from local storage to this remote destination in Michigan. You just copy, it will create the SDN path through the OSCAs, OESS, through the OpenFlow. Go to the next level of the carrier, for example, Internet 2 or ESNet, stitch the path in that domain if NSI is supported or if the IDC is supported, and then go to the next level, for example, in Merit, where you don't have any stitching done. It is just an overlay. And then finally, you reach to the Michigan, where you have another SDN interface. So this was one of the way where we designed and we created this utility, which is still there, and we are using actively in many of the demos and in the transfers.
Excellent. Chris?
Oops. So first, thanks for being the advisory group. It's a boon. It's great that you take the time and you come and work with the community and provide input and guidance. And on that thread, my question is a little along the lines of, what do you see as the next set of challenges facing the OpenDaylight community? What do you see the OpenDaylight community really needs to start to address? And furthermore, what role would the advisory group play in helping achieve that?
Right, putting me on the spot now. So, I mean, I think one of my takeaways from this conference, which answers some of that, is there's the last few OpenDaylight summits and even the mini summit earlier this year, we were still talking about how do we get OpenDaylight in production. Some people had, but it wasn't that many. The mood I'm sensing from this conference is we've kind of moved well and truly into that it's in production, and we're now at that, how do we sustain that mode? So it's probably one of the questions Phil probably had for us in a moment. But some of the key challenges there are, how do we operationalize this? How do we get our ops teams to run this thing? What tools do they need to be able to do that? When we need to upgrade things, how do we make that process smoother? Those kinds of things. As far as the advisory group in that role, we just need to keep giving feedback about what those things mean to us so that the development community understand what those pain points are going to be. And I'm sure my colleagues here can give more specific examples of what that means. Some of that's going to be uncomfortable. I mean, we were talking yesterday about things like continuous deployment as an option, which has a dramatic impact on how you write the code from the start and which features of OpenDaylight you'll be able to use. So there's going to be a lot more of this collaborative back and forth about which features do we really need to be able to do that, for example.
Very good. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think the operationalization of the platform is really the key here, right? So once we get to closer to deployment or more deployments, on the horizon coming our way, I think the operation is everything, and right. So one specific area is really to make the platform, the OpenDaylight platform, working with the other systems that we might have, right? For example, we talk about orchestration system. Yeah, so this is extremely important. So the whole programmable network or new services on top of this network is not kind of live there on isolation. In many cases, it's not just one controller. We talk about many controllers. We have seen a lot of slides, right? The other use case is a lot of controllers. They have to work together. So this is all about the operation and how you make it a scale, right? How you make it the performance, centric solution. So is ChinaMobile, we have a huge network down in the field, right? We're talking about supporting 800 million subscribers. So imagine that size, right? The network size. So every time we look at a solution, the one thing in our mind is scalability and performance, right? So if the platform, the project will focus on just bringing the scalability and the performance numbers to the next level, I think it will really be something that we think is going to be winning solution there for sure, right? So I think once the point is once we get into the operation, I think all these things start to really be the deciding factor, whether we're going to deploy it soon or how much we're going to deploy that, right?
Excellent. Very good. Well, we are out of time, folks. Thank you very much for your attention. We are on break now. We will be starting the regular sessions at 10:55, and please help me in thanking our panelists.